Rich stood at the podium in Angels Haven's main assembly hall, his dress uniform pristine, his expression radiating sincerity as he addressed the mixed crowd of angels and council representatives. The morning light streamed through the high windows, casting an almost theatrical glow over the proceedings. "Together," he declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed room, "we stand at the dawn of a new era. The Remnant Angels and the Galactic Council, united in purpose, dedicated to justice and peace throughout the galaxy." The applause was thunderous. Rich saw Vale in the front row, her white eyes gleaming with approval. Beside her, Nora smiled proudly at her husband, every inch the supportive partner. Trevor and Luis flanked the stage, looking sharp and professional in their formal uniforms. The perfect picture of unity and cooperation, and all of it a carefully crafted lie. His mind drifted to the meeting in his private quarters just 12 hours earlier, where the true face of the Angels had emerged in the secure confines of Luis's surveillance-proof shielding. Trevor had paced like a caged predator, his fury barely contained as he growled about the Council's inevitable betrayal. Luis, hunched over his datapad, had revealed the true extent of their oversight, a systematic documentation of every weakness, every pressure point they could exploit against the Angels. Rich had shared their anger, though his burned colder, deeper. He'd seen this pattern before, they all had. The Council would use them to root out the visible corruption, then either absorb or eliminate them. Just like they'd done to the Stellar Guardians, the Nova Corps, and every other independent group that had grown too powerful. But Rich had been preparing for this possibility since the Angels' formation. He had a plan, multiple plans, layered like the armor they wore into battle. A temporary sanctuary waited in the shadows of space, a place where they could regroup and plan their next move. Beyond that lay something else, something he kept even from his closest allies. The fewer who knew the final destination, the better. Now, stepping down from the podium to accept congratulations from oblivious council officials, Rich played his part with practiced ease. Vale approached last, her midnight blue features set in an expression of satisfaction. "Excellent speech, Commander. You've done much to ease the Council's concerns about integration." "Just doing my part," Rich replied smoothly. "We're all on the same side now, after all." He watched Luis at a nearby terminal, seemingly absorbed in routine systems maintenance. In reality, the young tech specialist was laying the groundwork for their grand deception, a fictional threat that would give them the distraction they needed to vanish into the stars. Nora appeared at his side, sliding her arm through his with practiced ease. "The Council representatives would like to discuss the new joint training protocols over dinner," she said, her performance flawless. Rich nodded, already composing the secure message he would send to their hidden allies. Throughout the galaxy, other independent groups waited for their signal, ready to help create the chaos that would cover their escape. As they walked through the halls of Angels Haven, Rich maintained his facade of dedicated cooperation. But inside, a fire burned, not of revenge or hatred, but of pure determination. The Angels would be free again. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, whether at their temporary sanctuary or the secret final destination he held close to his heart, they would rebuild everything they had fought for, this time without compromise. He just had to get them there first. The game of deception had begun, and Rich Greaves intended to play it to perfection. The holographic star map cast eerie shadows across Rich's face as he studied the complex web of fabricated terrorist activities Luis had created. Each glowing point represented a carefully crafted lie, supply routes that didn't exist, training camps that were merely digital phantoms, weapon stockpiles conjured from imagination and clever data manipulation. "The Council's intelligence division is already picking up the breadcrumbs," Luis reported, his fingers dancing across the controls. The map shifted, highlighting a series of red vectors. "They think they've uncovered a pattern of suspicious ship movements across the outer rim." Trevor leaned against the wall, cleaning his blaster with methodical precision. "How long before they commit resources to investigating?" "They already have," Nora answered, striding into the secure room with a datapad. "Vale just received orders to assemble a task force. She wants our best people to join the investigation." Rich allowed himself a small smile. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The fictional terrorist organization, which Luis had dubbed the Crimson Dawn with a touch of theatrical flair, was already consuming Council attention and resources. "We'll give them our best," Rich said, emphasizing the deception. "Carefully chosen teams who know nothing about our true plans. They'll chase shadows across the galaxy while we prepare." A priority alert flashed across the main screen. An actual terrorist cell had just attacked a Council facility in the Helix sector. Rich felt his jaw tighten, This unexpected complication could either ruin their plans or provide perfect cover. "This changes things," Nora said, reading his thoughts as she often did. "We'll need to adjust our timeline." "Or," Trevor interjected, "pushing away from the wall, we use it. Feed the Council intelligence suggesting this real attack is connected to our fictional network. Let them chase both ghosts at once." Luis was already modifying his fabricated data streams. "I can plant evidence linking the Helix attackers to our Phantom organization. Make it look like part of a larger pattern." Rich studied the new information, his mind racing through possibilities. This real threat could add credibility to their deception, make the Council even more desperate to uncover the supposed conspiracy. But it also meant dealing with actual terrorists while trying to maintain their elaborate charade. "Do it," he decided. "But we'll need to be careful. Vale's no fool. If we push too hard, she might spot the pattern." The next few hours were a symphony of careful manipulation. Luis wove the real attack into his fictional narrative, while Nora coordinated with their chosen teams, loyal angels who would chase leads across the galaxy, never knowing they were part of an elaborate escape plan. Trevor departed to brief his security teams, maintaining their image of heightened vigilance. On the surface, Angel's Haven hummed with purpose, a united force working with the Council to confront a growing threat. Below that surface, Rich and his core team continued their true work. Supply caches were established under the guise of forward operating bases. Backup identities were strengthened through carefully planted records. Loyal ships were modified, their tracking systems subtly altered to allow for future disappearance. Rich walked the halls of his base, nodding to passing Council representatives while his mind spun with calculations and contingencies. The temporary sanctuary was ready, a hidden installation in an unnamed system, reachable only through a series of blind jumps. But beyond that lay his true goal, a place he'd discovered years ago and kept secret even from his closest allies. A place where the angels could be reborn. Vale intercepted him near the command center, her white eyes bright with purpose. "Commander, we've received authorization for a full-scale investigation. The Council is taking this threat seriously." "As they should," Rich replied, his mask of cooperative dedication firmly in place. "The angels stand ready to assist in any way we can." Vale nodded, satisfied, and continued on her way. She never noticed the subtle signal Rich gave to a passing angel, one of many messages in their private code. Another piece of their escape plan clicking into place. The perfect distraction was building, growing larger and more convincing with each passing hour. Soon the Council would be too busy chasing phantoms to notice the real deception taking shape in their midst. Rich allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The game was complex, the stakes impossibly high, but the angels were masters of survival. They would maintain their facade of perfect cooperation until the moment came to vanish into the stars. And when that moment came, they would disappear so completely that not even the Council's vast resources would be able to track them through the darkness between the stars. The fabricated threat of the Crimson Dawn spread through Council space like a virus, consuming resources and attention exactly as planned. Rich watched from his office as another fleet of Council ships departed Angel's Haven, their engines flaring against the dawn sky as they chased yet another phantom lead. Luis's work was nothing short of masterful. Each false trail he created seemed to uncover 3 more, sending Council forces scrambling across the galaxy in an ever-expanding web of deception. The young tech specialist had even managed to corrupt the Council's tracking protocols without detection, laying the groundwork for the Angels' eventual disappearance. Vale's task force just hit another empty cache site, Nora reported, entering the office with her usual quiet grace. "She's requesting additional resources to expand the search pattern." Rich allowed himself a small smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "And how is our friend holding up?" "Frustrated, driven, exactly where we need her to be." Nora's expression softened slightly. "She truly believes in what we're doing here, Rich." "Sometimes I almost feel guilty about don't," Rich cut her off, his voice gentle but firm. "Vale's dedication to the Council is admirable, but it's also exactly why we can't trust her with the truth. She'd feel obligated to report us." A priority alert flashed across his desk console. Trevor's face appeared, his expression tense. "Boss, we might have a problem. One of the new Council techs is asking questions about our ship modification protocols." Rich felt his pulse quicken, though his face remained impassive. They'd known this moment would come. Someone was bound to notice the subtle changes they were making to their vessel's tracking systems. "Have Luis handle it," he ordered. "He knows what to do." Within an hour, the curious tech found himself reassigned to Vale's task force, his concerns lost in the larger investigation. Another potential threat neutralized, another small victory in their elaborate game of deception. But as Rich stood at his usual spot on the command center balcony, watching Angels and Council personnel work side by side below, he felt the weight of their deception pressing down on him. Every smile was false, every cooperative gesture a lie. Even now, as they appeared to be integrating more deeply with Council operations, the Angels were slowly pulling away. Critical personnel were being quietly transferred to forward operating bases, really waypoints on their eventual escape route. Essential equipment disappeared into requisition errors. Even their most sensitive data was being systematically erased and relocated, replaced with convincing but ultimately empty duplicates. The Council's starting to see patterns in the Crimson Dawn activity, Lewis reported later that evening, his voice barely above a whisper in their secure room. They think they're closing in on something big. They're seeing exactly what we want them to see, Rich replied, studying the latest intelligence reports. How long until he stopped as a new alert flashed across the screen? His blood ran cold as he read the message. Vale was returning to Angel's Haven, 3 days ahead of schedule. She's found something, Nora said, reading over his shoulder. Something that doesn't fit our narrative. Rich's mind raced through possibilities. Vale was too intelligent, too experienced to fool forever. If she'd spotted a flaw in their deception, move up the timeline, he ordered, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had led the Angels through countless crises. Begin final preparations. We may need to disappear sooner than planned. As his team sprang into action, Rich allowed himself a moment to think about their temporary sanctuary waiting in the darkness between stars. It would serve its purpose, give them a place to regroup and reorganize. But beyond that lay his true goal, a place he'd discovered years ago, a perfect haven for what the Angels would become. The game was entering its final phase. Soon they would shed these masks they'd worn for too long, break free from the Council's suffocating oversight. But first, they had to maintain their deception just a little longer, had to play their parts to perfection even as Vale's return threatened to unravel everything they'd worked for. Rich squared his shoulders and prepared to greet Vale with the same cooperative smile he'd worn for weeks. The Remnant Angels were masters of survival, experts at adapting to changing circumstances. If Vale had indeed discovered something, they would adjust, adapt, overcome. After all, the best lies were built on foundations of truth. And there was one truth that would never change: the Angels would be free again, no matter the cost. Angel's Haven hummed with unprecedented activity as Rich orchestrated what appeared to be their greatest joint operation with the Council. Hundreds of ships filled the skies above the base, their hulls gleaming in the artificial dawn. To any observer, it looked like the culmination of everything they'd built together, the perfect partnership between the Angels and the Council. The deception was absolute. Strike teams Alpha through Delta are deployed. Trevor reported from his station, his voice carrying the perfect mix of professional tension and excitement. Council fleet elements are moving into position. Rich stood at the command center's heart, projecting an aura of focused determination as he coordinated what seemed to be a massive strike against the Crimson Dawn. In reality, each order he gave served two purposes: maintaining their elaborate facading while orchestrating the Angels' gradual disappearance. Multiple targets identified across 3 sectors, Lewis announced, his fingers dancing across his console. With each command, he was systematically corrupting the Council's ability to track Angel ships, disguising it as battle-related system failures. Vale stood nearby, her white eyes intense as she studied the tactical displays. She'd returned with troubling questions about inconsistencies in the Crimson Dawn intelligence, but the sheer scale of this operation seemed to have temporarily quieted her suspicions. "Commander," she said, turning to Rich, "the Council is committing significant resources to this strike. Are you certain your intelligence is accurate?" Rich met her gaze steadily, years of command experience lending weight to his words. "The Crimson Dawn has threatened everything we've built, investigator. We stake our reputation on this intelligence. Their reputation and their freedom. Each passing moment brought more equipment failures, more communication disruptions that isolated Angel's Haven from Council oversight. Teams of loyal Angels slipped away under the cover of combat operations, vanishing into predetermined rendezvous points across the galaxy. Multiple contacts. A sensor operator called out, emerging from hyperspace in Sector 7. Rich allowed himself a thin smile, right on schedule. These were their allies, independent groups who shared their distrust of central authority, playing their part in the charade. They would create just enough real combat to make the operation seem legitimate. But then something changed. Vale's posture shifted subtly as she received a private communication. Her expression remained neutral, but Rich knew that look. She'd figured something out. "Interesting tactical deployment, Commander," she said carefully. "Though I notice several of your key teams are positioned rather unusually." "Adapting to battlefield conditions," Rich replied smoothly, even as his mind raced through contingencies. They weren't ready. Too many pieces still needed to be moved. Too many angels still needed to clear the base. A warning light flashed on Luis's console. Council ships were moving to block several of their planned escape vectors. Vale's discovery had triggered something larger than they'd anticipated. Rich made a split-second decision. He opened a secure channel and transmitted a single word: nightfall. Throughout Angel's Haven, loyal angels who knew the true plan sprang into action. Emergency protocols activated, but not the ones the Council knew about. This was the Angels' own contingency, prepared for exactly this scenario. Multiple system failures reported. Luis called out, selling the deception even as he implemented their true plan. "Base defenses are going dark." Vale's eyes narrowed. "Commander, I'm ordering Council ships to the command center." Plunged into darkness. When the emergency lights came up seconds later, chaos reigned. Alarms blared, ships moved in seemingly random patterns, and through it all, the Angels executed their carefully planned exodus. "Base reactor showing critical instability," Luis reported, his voice carrying just the right note of panic. "Recommending immediate evacuation." Rich locked eyes with Vale across the command center. In that moment he saw understanding dawn in her pupilless gaze, understanding and something else. Respect? Disappointment? Both. "Get everyone out," Rich ordered, maintaining his command presence even as the base appeared to fall apart around them. "Emergency protocols are in effect." As evacuation orders echoed through Angel's Haven, Rich allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. Even with Vale's discovery forcing their hand, the Angels were doing what they did best: adapting, surviving, disappearing into the chaos like ghosts in the night. The last show was reaching its finale, but not quite the one they'd planned. Sometimes, Rich reflected as he coordinated the controlled chaos around him, the best performances were the ones that appeared to go wrong. Angel's Haven died spectacularly. The base's reactor core lit up the night sky like a newborn star, its carefully controlled detonate shockwaves across the desert landscape. Rich watched from the bridge of his command ship as the place they'd called home, for so long transformed into a smoking crater, the perfect cover for their disappearance. Luis had outdone himself. The explosion looked catastrophic but was precisely calculated to destroy only what they wanted destroyed. Evidence of their deception, traces of their true plans, and enough of the base's structure to make their apparent destruction convincing. "Council vessels are launching rescue operations," Nora reported from her station, her voice carrying the perfect mix of shock and professional detachment. "They're searching for survivors. They wouldn't find many. Most of the Angels were already gone, scattered across the stars in carefully planned patterns. Only Rich's core team and a handful of others remained to play out this final act." "Incoming transmission," Trevor announced. "It's Vale." Rich squared his shoulders. This would be the performance of his life. Put her through. Vale's holographic image appeared before him, her white eyes blazing with a mixture of emotions Rich couldn't quite read. "Commander Greaves," she said, her harmonic voice tight with tension. "Your base is destroyed. The Crimson Dawn never existed," Rich finished for her. "You figured that out, didn't you?" "But not soon enough." A ghost of a smile crossed Vale's features. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the beginning." Rich allowed some of his true feelings to show through. "The Council's corruption runs too deep, Vale. We won't be controlled by another failed system. You realize I have to try to stop you." "You can try." Rich's smile was genuine now. "But first you'll have to find us." As if on cue, Luis activated his masterwork. Throughout Council space, tracking systems suddenly lost their lock on Angel vessels. Communication networks experienced mysterious failures. Identification protocols scrambled. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected. Someone on Vale's end shouted, They're everywhere." Rich's team had launched dozens of automated ships, each broadcasting false Angel signatures, each jumping in a different direction. In the confusion, their true escape vessels slipped away like shadows in a storm. "Goodbye, Vale," Rich said softly. "You're good at your job, but we're better at ours." He cut the transmission before she could respond. Around him, his bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, their movements sure despite the weight of leaving everything they'd known behind. "All teams reporting successful jumps," Nora announced. "We're ready." Rich took one last look at the burning remains of Angel's Haven. They'd built something remarkable there, but perhaps they'd needed to lose it to become something greater. "Take us out," he ordered. Jump pattern Omega 3. The stars stretched into lines as they made the first of many calculated jumps. They would rendezvous with the others at the temporary sanctuary he prepared, a hidden place where they could regroup and plan their next moves. But even as they fled into the darkness between stars, Rich's mind was on another place, a secret he'd carried for years. A permanent home that even his closest companions didn't know about yet. When the time was right, when they were ready, he would lead them there. "They'll hunt us," Trevor said quietly, breaking the silence on the bridge. "Let them." Rich's voice carried absolute conviction. The galaxy's a big place, and we're very good at disappearing. As their ship raced through hyperspace, carrying them toward an uncertain future, Rich felt a weight lift from his shoulders. No more masks, no more pretending to believe in a corrupt system. The remnant angels were free again, ready to rebuild, to become something new. The irony wasn't lost on him. In appearing to die, they had found new life. In seeming to fail, they had achieved their greatest victory. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, a new home waited for them. But for now, they were together, they were free, and they had all of creation in which to hide. The remnant angels had disappeared into legend, and legends Rich knew were far harder to catch than mere fugitives. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave it a like and to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Feel free to comment and share it as well. With all that said, go on and check out the video in the top left. I think you might like it.